The silence in our house was a polished, heavy thing, much like the antique mahogany table that sat unblemished in our dining room, a testament to a life meticulously curated. From the outside, anyone looking in would have seen perfection. A modern suburban sanctuary, framed by immaculate lawns and a vibrant burst of hydrangeas each summer. We had the thriving careers, the tasteful art, the subtle hum of a life well lived. Mark and I, in our carefully chosen roles, were the embodiment of success, of comfort, of a future carved from stability. We were the couple friends admired, the ones who seemed to have all the answers, a quiet envy simmering behind polite smiles at dinner parties. But inside, beneath the perfectly calibrated thermostat and the scent of expensive diffusers, the silence was not peaceful. It was cavernous, a vast, echoing chasm that grew wider with each passing year. It wasn't a silence born of contentment, but one of unspoken truths, of conversations left unstarted, of emotions carefully tucked away behind a facade of agreeable politeness. We moved through our days like two planets in a well-defined orbit, predictable and safe, yet utterly alone in our individual journeys. Mark would rise, go for his morning run, come back, shower, and descend to the kitchen where I'd have coffee brewing. He'd read the financial news on his tablet. I'd check emails on my laptop. We'd exchange observations about work, about house repairs, about the weather. Our eyes would meet over the rim of our mugs, a brief, fleeting connection like two ships passing in a fog, acknowledging existence before disappearing back into the mist. The physical intimacy, once a vibrant, urgent current between us, had slowed to a trickle, then a barely perceptible drip. It wasn't that we never touched. We held hands sometimes, a reflex in public, a familiar pressure that no longer conveyed warmth. Sex became a scheduled event, an item to be checked off a mental list, performed with a practiced tenderness that lacked all spark. I remember lying beside him, the scent of his skin so intimately known, yet feeling as though he were a stranger in my bed. My body, once responsive and eager, lay dormant, a vessel without a sail. I would stare at the ceiling, the shadows of the tree outside our window dancing with the streetlights, a heavy, dull ache pressing behind my eyes. It wasn't a sharp pain, but a pervasive, constant throb of longing for something, for passion, for spontaneity, for a raw, unedited glimpse of the man I'd married, or even a raw, unedited glimpse of myself, the lonely.
S became a physical companion. It settled in my chest, a constant pressure, a quiet hum just beneath my ribs. Sometimes, at the end of a long day, after Mark had retreated to his study with his books and I to the living room with mine, I would feel it surge, a cold, empty wave washing over me. Frustrated, a desperate urge to scream, to shatter the elegant silence, to break something beautiful, just to feel something real. Instead, I'd trace the patterns on our oriental rug with my bare toe, a silent, internal monologue playing on repeat. Is this all there is? Is this my life? The question burned, a tiny, persistent ember in the otherwise placid landscape of my existence. Thoughtful. I knew Mark loved me, in his way, a steady, dependable love that felt more like a comfortable friendship than a consuming fire. But I craved fire. I craved to feel desired, to be seen not just as his capable wife, but as a vibrant, complex woman. Sad. I yearned for the breathless anticipation, the wildness that felt so utterly absent from our meticulously constructed world. Frustrated. The silence was suffocating. I needed to breathe.
The spark didn't arrive with a bang, but with the quiet hum of a smartphone vibrating on the polished oak of my desk. His name, Alex, shimmered on the screen, a new constellation in my carefully mapped digital universe. We had met a few weeks prior, at a dreary interdepartmental mixer that I'd almost skipped. Mark was away on a business trip, and I was feeling particularly invisible that week, lost in the humdrum of my routine. I remember the fluorescent lights of the conference room, the clinking of glasses, the forced laughter. He was new to the company, tall, with eyes that held an unnerving intensity, a gaze that seemed to pierce through the polite veneer I usually presented. We had talked about a project, then about art, then about travel. Subjects that, with Mark, felt like polite inquiries rather than genuine explorations. Alex had listened, truly listened, his head slightly tilted, a subtle smile playing on
In his lips. When he spoke, his voice was a low, resonant baritone, and I remember feeling a strange shiver that wasn't from the air conditioning. Curious. It wasn't overtly flirtatious, not yet, but there was an undeniable current, a spark of recognition in our brief exchange, like two forgotten languages suddenly finding a common word. The first message was innocuous, a follow-up about the project. Then another, later that evening, "Hope your week is less mind-numbing than that mixer was," starts laughing. It made me laugh out loud, a genuine, uninhibited sound I hadn't heard from myself in ages. I typed back, "Tell me about it. Any good escapes planned?" And so it began. A slow drip, then a steady stream of messages. Good morning texts that felt like a secret sunrise just for me. Lingering conversations late into the night, after Mark was asleep in the adjacent room, his gentle snores a rhythmic counterpoint to the rapid thrumming of my heart. Excited, I'd cradle the phone beneath the covers, the screen casting a pale glow on my face, Alex's words illuminating corners of my mind I hadn't realized were dark. We talked about everything. Our ambitions, our frustrations, the books we loved, the music that moved us. Thoughtful. He asked me about my dreams, not the practical, achievable ones, but the wild, forgotten ones.
He saw the woman beneath the polished exterior, and he articulated her back to me, making her feel real again. Each notification was a jolt, a physical shockwave that radiated from my phone to my fingertips, up my arm, and settled directly in the pit of my stomach. A tremor of adrenaline, a rush of forbidden excitement. I'd feel my cheeks flush, a warmth spreading across my skin, a visceral reaction that both thrilled and terrified me. My heart would pound, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, each thump a silent acknowledgement of the boundary I was dancing near. I started carrying my phone everywhere, even into the bathroom, jumping at every ping, every vibration. My replies were swift, almost desperate. I'd compose long, thoughtful paragraphs, then delete them, reducing my sentiments to something more casual, less revealing, yet still imbued with the unspoken intimacy that had begun to bloom between us. The internal psychological state.
Ruggles was a constant tug of war. This is harmless, I'd tell myself, a mantra whispered to quell the rising tide of guilt. It's just friendship. He's just a colleague. Mark and I are fine. This is just a little escape, a mental vacation. Sad. But deep down, I knew it was more. The way my breath would catch when I saw Alex in the hallway at work, the extra care I took with my appearance, the anticipation that hummed beneath my skin from the moment I woke up. I was consciously, deliberately feeding this connection, allowing it to grow, ignoring the screaming red flags. The denial was a flimsy veil, but I clung to it, preferring the comfortable delusion to the terrifying truth. Curious. I was enjoying the attention, yes, but it wasn't just attention. It was the feeling of being chosen, of being desired, of being seen as something more than just a wife, a colleague, a friend, excited. It was the thrill of the illicit, the delicious danger of walking a tightrope without a net, all while pretending to simply admire the view. The air around me felt charged, heavy with unspoken desires and the thrilling, terrifying secret I carried. Long pause. It was like I was holding my breath, waiting for something, anything, to finally break.
The night it happened began not with a premeditated plan, but with a crack in the carefully constructed facade of my week. A minor disagreement with Mark, escalating into a tense silence that stretched across our dinner table like an invisible force field. It wasn't about anything significant. A misplaced bill, a forgotten appointment, but it served as a fuse. The polite distance between us felt especially cruel, especially isolating. I felt small, dismissed, a silent scream building behind my teeth. He retreated to his study, the familiar click of the door echoing the finality of our non-argument, and I was left alone in the stark silence of the living room, the quiet desperation swelling into a suffocating wave. My phone, a silent conspirator, vibrated. It was my friend Sarah texting. Girls' night out? My place, then heading to the Electric Serpent. Need to dance the week away. Hey!
Sudden, urgent impulse propelled me. Anything to escape the oppressive quiet of the house, the weight of my own invisible presence. I'm in, I typed back, energetic, a decision made in a split second of rebellion. I told Mark I was going out with Sarah and Lisa. Thoughtful, he grunted a distracted acknowledgement from behind his closed study door. No questions, no concern, just the familiar, absent acceptance. The electric serpent was a throbbing, pulsating beast of a nightclub, its bass line a physical assault that vibrated through the soles of my shoes and up into my very bones. The air was thick with the cloying sweetness of cheap perfume, the metallic tang of spilled beer, and the musky scent of 100 dancing bodies. Neon lights, a kaleidoscopic blur of fuchsia and electric blue, sliced through the artificial fog, illuminating flashes of grinding hips and ecstatic faces. Energetic. The sheer volume was a welcome shock, a forceful cleansing of the quiet despair that had clung to me. With each beat, I felt a tension release, a loosening in my chest. I ordered a gin and tonic, then another, the liquid warmth spreading through me, dissolving the last remnants of my carefully maintained composure. Excited, I danced with Sarah and Lisa, my movements stiff at first, then flowing, losing myself in the rhythm. Chuckles, the sheer anonymity of the crowd, a liberating balm.
And then I saw him. Across the packed dance floor, framed by the pulsing lights, his silhouette instantly recognizable. Alex. My breath hitched, a sudden, sharp intake of air that felt like a physical blow. He wasn't with anyone I recognized. Our eyes met across the heaving mass of humanity, and for a fleeting second, the noise, the lights, the entire club seemed to fade into a distant hum. There was that same unnerving intensity in his gaze, a directness that made my stomach clench. He offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a silent invitation. My feet moved before my mind could process, weaving through the throng, pushing past strangers, the heat of their bodies a blur against mine. When I reached him, he was leaning against a pillar, a half-empty glass in his hand. "Fancy meeting you here," he said, his voice lower than the bass, cutting through the din with surprising clarity. I needed to escape. His eyes, dark and no.
Wing held mine, breathless. "Me too," I heard myself say, my voice a little breathless, a little unsteady. We moved to a quieter corner near a plush banquette seating area tucked away from the main dance floor. Energetic. The conversation flowed effortlessly, almost urgently. We talked about the week, about the arguments with unseen partners that had driven us both to seek refuge in the chaotic energy of the club. His hand found mine on the table, a brief, fleeting touch, yet it sent a jolt of raw electricity through my arm, igniting dormant nerves. Excited, my heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate for release. The gin had numbed my inhibitions, but it hadn't dulled my senses. On the contrary, every touch, every glance, every word felt magnified, hyper-real.
"You look beautiful tonight," he said, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. The simple words resonated with a depth that Mark's compliments, however well-intended, hadn't held in years. It wasn't just my appearance. It felt like he was seeing me, the woman yearning for recognition, for passion, for life. My throat tightened, a sudden urge to cry overwhelming me. I wanted to lean into his touch, to soak in the warmth, to feel alive again. The stop voice, a faint, distant whisper of reason, was drowned out by the thrumming desire for escape, for feeling truly, deeply seen and desired. His fingers interlaced with mine, a firm, possessive grip that left no room for doubt. He leaned in closer, his warm breath fanning against my cheek, carrying the scent of mint and whiskey. "I've thought about this all week," he murmured, his eyes searching mine. "About you." My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm that felt like
tea would tear through my chest. The world narrowed to just his face, his eyes, his words. The shame, the guilt, the awareness of Mark sleeping soundly in our bed miles away were distant echoes, overshadowed by an overwhelming primal need. To feel, to be desired, to burn. Excited. His lips touched mine, softly at first, a tentative exploration, then with a sudden, desperate hunger. It was an explosion of sensation, the taste of whiskey and mint, the velvety texture of his lips, the sudden pressure of his body against mine as he pulled me closer. My mind spun, a kaleidoscope of fear and exhilarating surrender. Energetic. I kissed him back, a frantic, urgent response, pouring all my pent-up longing, my quiet desperation, my unexpressed desires into that kiss. My fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer still, wanting to drown in the sensation, to lose myself entirely.
The world outside the bubble of our embrace ceased to exist. The pulsating music became a distant hum, the crowd a blur. All that mattered was the intoxicating rush, the feeling of being utterly consumed and utterly consuming. His hands moved, tracing the curve of my back, resting firmly on my hips, pulling me tight against him. My breath came in shallow gasps, my body responding with a raw, almost shocking intensity. We moved further back into the shadows of the booth, bodies pressed together, a tangle of limbs and hungry mouths. The kisses deepened, becoming more insistent, more demanding. His hands explored, a searing trail of fire against my skin, sending shivers through my entire body. I was dizzy with it, the heady rush of forbidden pleasure, the electric shock of being touched in a way that felt both utterly foreign and profoundly familiar. It was a complete capitulation, a raw, unapologetic shedding of all the layers of politeness.
Ass and expectation I had worn for so long, the metallic taste of burgeoning regret mingled with the sweet, intoxicating taste of his mouth. Sad. It was wrong, devastatingly, irrevocably wrong, yet in that moment, in the throbbing darkness of the club, it felt like the only real thing I had done in years. Sighs. The taxi ride home was a surreal blur, the city lights streaking past the window like fragmented memories. The intoxicating high had vanished, replaced by a cold, leaden dread that settled deep in my stomach. Appalled. The metallic taste of regret was cloying, almost making me gag. My body, still buzzing with the ghost of his touch, felt foreign and tainted. Every nerve ending seemed to vibrate with a potent mixture of self-disgust and a lingering, unwanted ghost of exhilaration. My clothes felt wrong. My skin felt wrong. Sad, I was stained.
I slipped into our silent house, the familiar quiet now heavy with my secret. The click of the lock seemed deafening. Mark was asleep, his even breathing a steady rhythm from our bedroom. I stood by the door for a long moment, my hand still on the knob, utterly paralyzed. My heart was pounding, not with excitement now, but with terror. A cold sweat prickled my skin. I made my way to the bathroom, the pale moonlight filtering through the window, casting stark shadows. I looked at myself in the mirror, my reflection a stranger. My eyes were wide, pupils dilated, dark smudges beneath them. My lips were swollen, a visible mark of my transgression. A wave of nausea washed over me. I wanted to peel off my skin, to wash away the memory, the scent, the feeling of being utterly defiled, but it was etched on my soul. Waking up next to Ma.
RK the next morning was a fresh wave of agony, the innocent warmth of his body beside me, the familiar scent of his pillow, the soft sigh he emitted in his sleep. Each mundane detail was a fresh accusation. Frustrated, I couldn't bear to look at him. My chest felt constricted, as if an invisible hand was squeezing my lungs. I feigned sleep, my eyes squeezed shut, listening to the gentle rhythm of his breathing, the profound unfairness of my deception pressing down on me. Sad, I felt like a monster, an imposter, and yet, despite the crushing weight of guilt, the next day, a familiar ping vibrated from my phone. Surprised. Last night was unexpected in the best way. Alex. Rushed. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone. The stop voice was a feeble whisper, easily overpowered by the intoxicating pull of the forbidden. Thoughtful, I replied, and so the double life began.
The initial intent, a desperate, alcohol-fueled one-off, quickly morphed into something more insidious, more pervasive. The thrill of Alex's messages, the intense, validating conversations, the feeling of being seen and desired. It was a powerful, addictive drug. We started meeting for coffee that stretched into hours, work lunches that were anything but. Each clandestine rendezvous was a meticulously choreographed dance of lies and half-truths. My days became a careful balancing act, a mental calendar constantly being updated, cross-referenced with Mark's schedule, my own work commitments, and Alex's availability. I became a master of deception, my lies delivered with a casual confidence that both astonished and disgusted me. The paranoia was a constant companion, a tightening band around my head, a gnawing hole in my stomach. Every time Mark's phone rang, every time he walked into the room unexpectedly, my heart would lurch, a slip.
Udden, cold terror gripping me. My phone, once a source of comfort, became a dangerous object. I hid it beneath cushions, locked it, deleted messages after reading them, constantly checking for notifications. terrified of a stray text popping up at the wrong moment. Whispers. My mind was a whirlwind of scenarios. What if he finds out? What will I say? How will I explain? I felt trapped in a self-made prison of deceit, constantly vigilant, always on edge. Gasps. There were near misses that sent spikes of ice through my veins. Once, Alex called me on a Sunday morning while Mark and I were having breakfast. My phone, on silent, buzzed relentlessly in my purse under the table. I saw his name on the caller ID, a vibrant red against the pale glow. My hand flew to it, my blood running cold. Rushed. I fumbled, knocked over my water glass, creating a noisy distraction as I furiously pressed reject. Mark, oblivious, just frowned at the spilled water. Surprised. Another time, I saw Alex across the aisle at the grocery store while Mark was looking at cheeses. Our eyes met, a flash of recognition, a silent, panicked agreement to look away. Sad, I felt my face flush, a hot wave of shame and terror washing over me. I hurried Mark out of the store, my heart hammering, inventing an urgent errand to explain my sudden urgency. Thoughtful. The transformation in my personality was gradual but profound. I became an expert at compartmentalization, shifting between roles with unsettling ease. With Mark, I was the dutiful, slightly distant wife, careful not to betray any hint of the wild, secretive life I was leading. My conversations with him became even more superficial, laced with an underlying current of guilt that manifested as a tense politeness. Sad, I felt an inexplicable combination of anger and pity towards him. Anger for the emptiness that had driven me to this, and pity for the man I was systematically betraying.
With Alex, I was alive, vibrant, unrestrained. I laughed easily, shared freely, felt a spark of passion that had long been extinguished. These moments were intoxicating, an escape from the suffocating reality of my marriage. Yet even in those stolen hours, a shadow of guilt, a faint, bitter taste lingered. It was a vicious cycle. The thrill of the illicit providing a temporary high, followed by the crushing weight of self-hatred. The relentless inner voice whispering, "You are a liar. You are a cheat. You are destroying everything." My sleep became fractured, haunted by restless dreams and sudden awakenings. My mind racing through replays of conversations, anticipating future encounters, crafting new lies. My appetite waned, a constant knot of anxiety in my stomach making food unappealing. Friends commented on my distraction, on the way I seemed to drift in and out of conversations, my eyes holding
Nung a faraway look. I snapped at trivial things, the immense strain of maintaining the facade wearing me thin. Frustrated, I looked in the mirror and often didn't recognize the woman staring back, the dark circles under her eyes, the haunted expression, the subtle hardening of her features. I was a stranger to myself, adrift in a sea of deceit, desperately clinging to the fleeting moments of excitement, even as they dragged me further into the abyss. Alex, for all the attention he offered, couldn't fill the gnawing void inside me. He was another distraction, another addiction, but not a solution. Sighs. The emptiness persisted, only now it was compounded by shame, by the profound sense of losing myself entirely. Sad. The crash wasn't a sudden impact, but a slow, agonizing unraveling, like a meticulously woven tapestry coming apart thread by fragile thread. It began not with discovery, but with a series of quiet, unbearable moments that finally broke through the thick wall of my denial.
The first thread snapped during a quiet evening at home. Mark, unusually pensive, sat across from me on the sofa. He had just received news of a colleague's sudden illness, a reminder of life's fragility. He looked up from his hands, his eyes shadowed with a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. "You know," he said, his voice soft, "sometimes I wonder if we spend enough time just being together. Life feels so short, doesn't it?" He reached for my hand, his grip gentle, and for the first time in months, I felt a genuine, aching tenderness radiate from him. It wasn't about sex or passion or grand gestures. It was a simple, profound yearning for connection. And in that moment, as his fingers intertwined with mine, a tremor of pure, unadulterated shame tore through me. My stomach clenched, a sickening lurch, and a cold dread seeped into my bones. His words, so innocent, so heartfelt, became sharp blades, carving away at me.
A hardened shell, Frustrated, I felt a wave of nausea, a sudden, desperate urge to pull my hand away, to flee, but I stayed, trapped by the weight of his earnestness, by the horrifying realization of the depth of my betrayal. Sad, I could barely meet his gaze, my eyes darting away, fearing he would somehow see the grotesque truth written on my face. Another thread frayed a few days later. Alex and I were at one of our usual coffee shops, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and our hushed conversations. He was recounting a funny anecdote about a client, a casual story that drifted into a comment about his own complicated life. Sarcastic. "You know," he said, shrugging, "it's all just whatever. We're all just looking for a bit of fun, right? Nothing serious." The words hung in the air, a sudden chilling clarity. His eyes, which I had once found so intense and discerning, now seemed slightly vacant, almost indifferent. Sad. In that moment, the entire elaborate justification I had built around our connection, that it was deeper, more meaningful, a true escape, collapsed. It wasn't a grand, all-consuming passion. It was just fun, a casual dalliance for him, a distraction. I was just one more entanglement in his complicated life, a temporary thrill. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Sad. The shame returned, hot and stinging, but this time it was coupled with a profound sense of humiliation. Frustrated, I had allowed myself to be so deluded, to cling so desperately to a fantasy that didn't even truly exist for him. He saw me as a momentary escape, just as I saw him, but for me, it had begun to feel like so much more. This stark, dispassionate assessment from him, a man I had risked everything for, rendered my choices cheap, my sacrifices meaningless.
I drove home that day in a daze, the city outside the car window a blur of inconsequential colors. My throat felt tight, my chest heavy. I got into the house, and the silence, usually so suffocating, now felt utterly oppressive, mocking. I stumbled to the bathroom, and leaning over the sink, I retched. A dry, painful heave, the bile bitter in my throat. My body was reacting, finally, to the poison I had been feeding it. I caught my reflection in the mirror, and the woman staring back was gaunt, her eyes hollow, her mouth downturned. The transformation was complete. The vibrant, longing woman had been devoured by the liar, the cheat. What have I become? I whispered to the reflection, my voice cracking, barely audible. Who are you? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Because I truly didn't know. The cycle of thrill and shame, of exhilaration and self-disgust, had finally broken me. I was Exa.
Usted, physically and emotionally drained. The intricate web of lies had become a cage, and I was choking on the trapped air. Sighs. The thought of another secret text, another clandestine meeting, another moment of manufactured intimacy made me physically recoil. The energy to maintain the facade was gone, utterly depleted. Angry. The self-hatred was a monstrous, consuming beast. It clawed at my insides, a relentless tormentor. I hated my weakness, my cowardice, my insatiable need.